Hello, my name is Ellie Johnson, and I'm the Outreach Forester for Michigan Forest Association. And this is Why a Native Species? When you are doing a tree planting project, why should you focus on native to Michigan tree species? So this is the second of 5 videos in a series of training videos for being a participant in the Neighbor Network. So thank you for wanting to be a neighbor, and let's get started. So as a reminder, who is Michigan Forest Association? So we are a nonprofit who is striving to inspire and empower people to sustainably manage, conserve, and enjoy forests through education, advocacy, and fellowship. This video is serving as that education piece, so thank you again for being here. And another reminder, what exactly is the Neighbor Network? We are trying to connect private landowners with other private landowners to help each other with their forest management projects. And in particular, we're focusing on tree plantings or reforestation projects. Okay, so when you're doing a tree planting project, we're discussing something like a bit more large scale than landscaping your backyard per se. But though you should also consider these same ideals small scale too. But so when you're planting trees, you are creating habitat, right? They are, like all plants, they are the foundation of energy. If you can see on the side there, that energy pyramid that maybe you ran into in a middle school textbook, right? Plants are the foundation of energy across all types of ecosystems, especially across the ecosystems in Michigan, where we have a lot of different temperate forest ecosystem types, but across the entire planet, right? Plants just get to hang out and sit there and make food with the sunlight, and they in turn start the overall energy chain between them and then herbivores and everything else after, right? So without plants supporting everything else, as food, forage, there wouldn't be in everything else. So when you're thinking about doing a tree planting, it is important to think at that kind of scale, and that species have spent generations upon generations, have spent millennia in competition, in collaboration, in cohabitation. And if you were to take non-native species and move them to a new spot, they are missing on all of that history with everything else in that new area. And so they aren't going to serve as the same type of habitat or infrastructure like a tree species native to that site would be. Because again, they're the foundations of overall food webs. There's a number of different organisms that are consuming all parts of the trees, right? The leaves, the fruits, the nuts, the wood itself. And if you don't take into account all those relationships that you may or may not know about, you aren't going to be creating habitat. You're not going to be supporting the overall wildlife in your space. And if you're conducting a tree planting, there's a lot of reasons for why someone might be conducting a tree planting. But I'm just giving you the encouragement to consider planting trees that will further support the natural world around you. So think of it this way, right? That like, say you're lucky enough to have this type of view outside your back window, that you get to enjoy some northern hardwoods that is common, at least where I live in the northern lower peninsula. Me in my apartment right now, I am not one of the lucky ones to own land in the state, but if I did, I would like a ginkgo tree. I think they're pretty, they're bright yellow, their leaves are very cute. What's not to love, right? Ginkgos are not native to Michigan. I know this in my heart of hearts, and that they are an ancient species of tree that we discovered outside of temples in the old world, and their fruit isn't even consumed by organisms that exist anymore, right? They are a novel, fun species. I'm not going to do a whole tree planting of ginkgos. I just think they're cool and fun. If I happen to own property, putting up one by the house is not going to ruin anything, but I'm definitely going to be thinking of it as just like a cool piece of art in my yard. If I was doing a full-on tree planting of creating habitat, it wouldn't be hundreds and hundreds of ginkgos, right? Just like it shouldn't be hundreds and hundreds of sequoias or ponderosa pines or things that exist in other places. It's not going to be fitting into the overall food web of an environment like our native sugar maples and white pines and balsam firs and all those other good teammates, right? So having the occasional fun novel thing is fun for you, but if you're conducting an overall tree planting, it is better to think that you are creating the infrastructure for habitat. And so you should be thinking bigger picture than yourself. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of reasons that someone might be planting trees. These videos are talking more to people who are doing a reforestation project. So some type of forest or land management, larger scale thinking maybe, right? Maybe you're restoring an area that had been cleared or had lost trees from some invasive pest or disease, creating a windbreak, creating some type of privacy screen between a road and a neighbor. Any number of things, right? But again, in thinking of the concept of creating habitats, we're going to focus on these bottom two, right? Of like how native trees species support different types of native to Michigan wildlife. And then in turn, adding those native tree species as that foundation for that energy pyramid, right? As the foundation for food webs across the state is going to boost the overall biodiversity of your parcel. So let's think about wildlife, right? All species have different needs at different times. They are going to vary across their lifetime, and it's going to vary across the year, right? So generally, a organism has a few different needs that all of them, in order to survive and hopefully thrive, they're going to need at least food, water, cover, shelter, something protect them, and space. There are a lot of different ecosystems on the planet, right, that organisms can survive in, from like those vents down at the bottom of like the Marianas Trench or out in the desert. But for the sake of this conversation, we're talking about Michigan forest ecosystems, right? And examples of wildlife that are supported by the habitats that exist in Michigan. But so across the life cycle, sure, but we also in Michigan, we exist in an area of 4 seasons, right? We're a temperate zone at this latitude. And so the needs of different organisms are going to look a little different, or how they fulfill those needs, food, water, space, are going to fluctuate a bit or look a little different at different points of the year. And something that I want you to think about as you're planning your tree planting, what species go where, you may want to consider the idea of like calendar of color, that in thinking of the phenology or the timing of when a tree is doing different things, bud break, flowering, producing fruits, right? You may want to have a collection of species that are doing all those different activities at slightly different times. It's more beautiful for you because you always get to look out your window and see something flowering, but then you're also supporting a wider array of organisms throughout the entire year, right? So you're not only creating a beautiful landscape all year long, but you're definitely creating a functional one. So let's think of it this way. A bird's life cycle, right? They're laying a nest of eggs. Those babies hatch, and they are arguably some of the ugliest baby organisms on the planet, right? They're big old bug eyes and stuff. And the parents are leaving and coming back and bringing those babies food all the time. The food is often insects, right? It is caterpillars from butterflies or from moths at that step of their life cycle before they've metamorphosized into their flying adult selves, right? So those adult birds are going around picking off caterpillars from the leaves of different trees. And Dr. Doug Talamy, is a researcher over in New England, and his lab has been trying to pinpoint what species support what other species, right? What species of trees or plants are supporting the life cycles of other organisms. And they have found that one chickadee family, right? So black-capped chickadee, those little guys, they're feeding their babies between 350 and 570 caterpillars every day. So that's 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to get just that one nest of babies to adults and fledglings and like being able to fly out on their own and collect their own food, right? So when you're thinking about that, it's like, okay, you're trying to make bird habitat, but you're actually trying to make caterpillar habitat, right? And it's like, so what types of trees are caterpillars eating? And so this is also based on Doug Tallamy's research, and this slide was provided to me by my friends at the Northwest Invasive Species Network, my local CISMA, Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. But it's based on Doug Tallamy's work. And actually, this book, Bringing Nature Home, was published in 2007, and I've seen increased numbers on some of these. But I'm going to say those with a little asterisk of like, I don't have those other numbers pulled up in front of me. But think of it this way, right? So when you're trying to create bird habitat, when you're thinking of planting trees, the infrastructure of overall habitat, right? You're actually, step back, you're creating caterpillar habitat first. You weren't trying to get those baby birds out of the nest. The genus of oaks, so genus, the Latin name for any species is genus, species, specific epithet, right? A genus is like a collection of cousins. It's some like closely related organisms. So the genus for oaks is Quercus. The Quercus genus supports, going by this chart, 534 different species of caterpillars for moths and butterflies. I've seen recent papers that it's more like 700 different species, 900 different species. There's a lot of species of oaks out there, but still, that's an amazing amount of insect diversity that is supported by this one genus of trees. Willows is the salix. They support over 450. Same with prunus, which that's a lot of your cherry, plums, like a lot of different fruit trees fall under that genus. And you can read down the line, birches, over 400. Elm trees are supporting over 200 caterpillars, right? There are so many. These are the interactions that we've mapped out, right? Through this one, through Tallamy's lab. There are a lot of other interactions that we don't know about. So again, in thinking of this focus of this is why native tree species selection for tree planting is important, because you are creating this overall metropolis for so many other organisms to survive and thrive in your space. And in thinking about birds further, so the oak genus may support a lot of caterpillars, which in turn are getting a lot of young birds out of their nest. But birds are also feasting on a number of other different types of foods, especially as they're an adult. And so a lot of, especially our migratory songbirds, they are consuming a lot of soft mast or like fruiting trees. So the cedar waxwing here is thriving in some type of holly and a crabapple looking tree, but also like that bottom left there, that's your Prunus serotina. That's a black cherry. Prunus, if you remember, supports 450 species of caterpillars. So it's helping young birds get out of the nest, but then also for the state of Michigan, there are so many, we're in that migratory bird pathway, right? There are so many adult birds that love those fruits. And similarly, something to think about is that like they are consuming a lot of pine nuts too. So having a array of native Michigan tree species, you are supplying so much quality food at slightly different times of the year, at slightly different steps of their life cycle. And this is still pretty much just talking about birds. There are so many other things that rely on a number of different species to survive. We had talked about caterpillars for getting birds out of the nest, but also a more obvious example of the plant-insect interaction is all the pollinators that are supported by what you plant, right? Our native bumblebees love red maples and tulip trees and basswoods and eastern redbuds and black cherries. So your calendar of color, you are also directly connecting your habitat to hundreds of different pollinator species. And of course, there are a lot of other like more charismatic, large fauna out there, right, that are consuming our acorns, that are eating the actual wood. That's a black bear cub also going into black cherries. Apparently this is a slideshow on how cool black cherries are. And anyone who's tried to plant a privacy screen between them and their neighbor with northern white cedar knows that white-tailed deer absolutely love the greenery on those trees, right? So it's not only a lot of this presentation so far has been talking about like insects and birds. Of course, there are so many other interactions of, again, trees are that foundation of the overall energy pyramid of a food web. They are supporting everything else too. Not just forage though, right? So trees offer cover, and especially in thinking of like if you're doing a tree planting, if you're reforesting a field, let's say, and you've got all these different shade intolerant species, like your different oaks, and you've got black cherries mixed in for the birds and all this other stuff, it may be worth considering adding in some conifer pockets throughout a planting. Have some like white pines or red pines. They make great cover for the winter, especially. They're absorbing sunlight, and so then they'll act as a bit of a geothermal cover. It'll be a little warmer under there, a little bit protected from the wind and the elements, right? So having some clusters of conifers mixed throughout an overall planting, even if you are focusing on hardwoods, can offer a lot of benefits when it comes to building that habitat. And of course, if you're not planting an open field, say if you're planting along like in a wetland or along a river or stream corridor, right? So trees greatly influence aquatic ecosystems also. So wherever you are planting trees, wherever there is tree cover along a river, it's influencing everything downstream, right? So of course, wherever the trees are, that's where you're gonna have more shade. So there's gonna be less solar radiation hitting that water surface. So the cooler water temperatures are going to have a greater amount of dissolved oxygen. They're going to have slower decomposition rates, so it's going to be more balanced nutrient cycling. And all of this is creating really good habitat for a variety of macroinvertebrates and different like smaller insects, microbiology. You're just getting a lot more biodiversity in that aquatic space, which in turn is able to support its own robust and diverse food web, right? All rivers are flowing into some type of lake, and so if you keep the temperature cooler in that river or stream, it's going to help keep the temperature down in the overall lake that it's going into. So upland forest ecosystems are also influencing just the overall watershed, right? And those lakes may have those different game fish that you like to catch, right? Here's my friend Chelsea holding up a beautiful trout that she got fly fishing one time. So common cold water fish species you might be familiar with are trout, salmon, smelt. If you don't have that tree cover upriver and keeping that temperature down, that is eventually leading to that lake, it's going to alter the overall balance of the food web in that lake system, right? So intact forests, so upland forest ecosystems, are going to be creating cooler, cleaner water at that site locally, but then also downstream. And again, there's so many other reasons for why we're planting trees. Water quality is just one of them. They're also sequestering carbon, and they're, as we've said throughout this, supporting a diversity of other types of wildlife, from caterpillars to birds to fungus to black bears to all sorts of things, right? So when you're thinking about organizing your tree planting and what you should be focusing on, I hope that the majority of your choices are native to Michigan. So thank you for watching. This was the second of a 5-part video series, and I will see you soon at the next one.